Rachel Heller, M.A. Narrated by Walter Dixon. Introduction. The New Science of Adult Attachment. Chapter 1. Decoding Relationship Behavior. Only 2 weeks into dating this guy, and already I'm making myself miserable, worrying that he doesn't find me attractive enough, and obsessing about whether or not he's going to call. I know that once again I'll manage to turn all my fears about not being good enough into a self-fulfilling prophecy and ruin yet another chance at a relationship. What's wrong with me? I'm a smart, good-looking guy with a successful career. I have a lot to offer. I've dated some terrific women, but inevitably after a few weeks I lose interest and I start to feel trapped. It shouldn't be this hard to find someone I'm compatible with. I've been married to my husband for years, and yet feel completely alone. He was never one to discuss his emotions or talk about the relationship, but things have gone from bad to worse. He stays at work late almost every weeknight, and on weekends he's either at the golf course with friends or watching the sports channel on TV. There's just nothing to keep us together. Maybe I'd be better off alone. Each of these problems is deeply painful, touching upon the innermost core of people's lives. And yet, no one explanation or solution fits the bill. Each case seems unique and personal. Each stems from an endless number of possible root causes. Deciphering them would require a deep acquaintance with all the people involved. Past history, previous relationships, and personality type are just a few of the avenues that a therapist would need to pursue. This, at least, is what we, as clinicians in the field of mental health, were taught and believed, until we made a new discovery, one that provided a straightforward explanation for all 3 problems described before, and many more. The story of this discovery, and what came after it, is what this audiobook is all about. Is love enough? A few years ago, our close friend Tamara started dating someone new. I first noticed Greg at a cocktail party at a friend's house. He was unbelievably good looking, and I found the fact that I caught his eye very flattering. A few days later, we went out for dinner with some other people, and I couldn't resist the glimmer of excitement in his eyes when he looked at me. But what I found most exciting were his words, and an implicit promise of togetherness that he conveyed. The promise of not being alone. He said things like, "Tamara, you don't have to be home all by yourself. You can come and work over at my place. You can call me anytime you like." There was a comfort in these statements. The comfort of belonging to someone, of not being alone in the world. If I'd only listened carefully, I could have easily heard another message that was incongruent with this promise. A message that made it clear that Greg feared getting too close and was uncomfortable with commitment. Several times he'd mentioned that he'd never had a stable relationship, that for some reason he'd always grew tired of his girlfriends and felt the need to move on. Though I could identify these issues as potentially problematic, at the time I didn't know how to correctly gauge their implications. All I had to guide me was the common belief that many of us grew up with. The belief that love conquers all, and so I let love conquer me. Nothing was more important to me than being with him. Yet, at the same time, the other messages persisted about his inability to commit. I shrugged them off, confident that with me things would be different. Of course, I was wrong. As we got closer, his messages got more erratic, and everything started to fall apart. He began telling me that he was too busy to meet me on this night or that. Sometimes he'd claim that his entire work week looked crazy and would ask if we could just meet on the weekend. I'd agree, but inside I had a sinking feeling something was wrong. But what? From then on, I was always anxious. I was preoccupied with his whereabouts and became hypersensitive to anything that could possibly imply that he wanted to break up. But while Greg's occasionally with ample evidence of his dissatisfaction, he interspersed pushing me away with just enough affection and apologies to keep me from breaking up with him. After a while, the ups and downs started to take a toll, and I could no longer control my emotions. I didn't know how to act, and despite my better judgment, I'd avoid making plans with friends in case he called. I completely lost interest in everything else that was important to me. Before long, the relationship couldn't withstand the strain, and everything soon came to a screeching halt. As friends, we were happy at first to see Tamara meet someone new that she was excited about. But as the relationship unfolded, we became increasingly concerned over her growing preoccupation with Greg. Her vitality gave way to anxiousness and insecurity. Most of the time, she was either waiting for a call from Greg or too worried and preoccupied about the relationship to enjoy spending time with us, as she had done in the past. It became apparent that her work was also suffering, and she expressed some concern that she may lose her job. We had always considered Tamara to be an extremely well-rounded, resilient person, and we were starting to wonder if we were mistaken about her strength. Although Tamara could point out Greg's history of being unable to maintain a serious relationship and his unpredictability, and even acknowledge that she would probably be happier without him, she was not able to muster the strength to leave. As experienced mental health professionals, we had a hard time accepting that a sophisticated, intelligent woman like Tamara had so derailed from her usual self. Why was such a successful woman acting in such a helpless way? Why would somebody whom we've known to be so adaptive to most of life's challenges become powerless in this one? The other end of the equation was equally puzzling. Why would Greg send out such mixed messages, although it was clear even to us that he did love her? There were many possible, complex psychological answers to these questions, but a surprisingly simple yet far-reaching insight into the situation came from an unexpected source. From the therapeutic nursery, adult love. At the same time that Tamara was dating Greg, Amir was working part-time in the therapeutic nursery at Columbia University. Here, he used attachment-guided therapy to help mothers create a more secure bond with their children. The powerful effect that attachment-guided treatment had on the relationship between mother and child encouraged Amir to deepen his knowledge of attachment theory. This eventually led him to a fascinating discovery. As research findings first made by Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver indicated, adults show patterns of attachment to their romantic partners similar to the patterns of attachment of children with their parents. As he read more about adult attachment, Amir began to notice attachment behavior in adults all around him. He realized that this discovery could have astounding implications for everyday life. The first thing he did, once he realized the far-reaching implications of attachment for adult relationships, was to call his longtime friend Rachel. He described to her how effectively attachment theory explained the range of behaviors in adult relationships, and asked her to help him transform the academic studies and scientific data he'd been reading into practical guidelines and advice that people could use to actually change the course of their lives. And that's how this audiobook came to be. The secure, the anxious, and the avoidant. Attachment theory designates three main attachment styles, or manners in which people perceive and respond to intimacy in romantic relationships, which parallel those found in children: secure, anxious, and avoidant. Basically, secure people feel comfortable in intimacy and are usually warm and loving. Anxious people crave intimacy, are often preoccupied with their relationships, and tend to worry about their partner's ability to love them back. Avoidant people equate intimacy with loss of independence and constantly try to minimize closeness. In addition, people with each of these attachment styles differ in their view of intimacy and togetherness, the way they deal with conflict, their attitude towards sex, their ability to communicate their wishes and needs, all people in our society, whether they have just started dating someone or been married for 40 years, fall into one of these categories, or more rarely, into a combination of the latter two, anxious and avoidant. Just over 50% are secure, around 20% are anxious, 25% are avoidant, and the remaining 3 to 5% fall into a fourth, less common, disorganized category. Over the past 2 decades, adult attachment research has produced hundreds of scientific papers and dozens of books that carefully delineate the way in which adults behave in close romantic ties. These studies have confirmed, many times over, the existence of these attachment styles in adults in a wide range of countries and cultures, including the United States, Australia, Canada, Germany, Israel, Italy, Portugal, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. Understanding attachment styles is an easy and reliable way to understand and predict people's behavior in any romantic situation. In fact, one of the main messages of this theory is that in romantic situations, we are programmed to act in a predetermined manner. Where do attachment styles come from? Initially, it was assumed that adult attachment styles were primarily a product of your upbringing. Thus, it was hypothesized that your current attachment style is determined by the way in which you were cared for as a baby. If your parents were sensitive, available, and responsive, you should have a secure attachment style. If they were inconsistently responsive, you should develop an anxious attachment style. If they were distant, rigid, and unresponsive, you should develop an avoidant attachment style. Today, however, we know that attachment styles in adulthood are influenced by a variety of factors, one of which is the way our parents cared for us, but other factors also come into play, including our genes and life experiences. For more, listen to Chapter 7. Tomorrow in Gray, a fresh perspective. We revisited our friend Tamara's story and saw it in an entirely new light now. Research contained a prototype of Gray, who had an avoidant attachment style, accurate down to the last detail. It summarized how he thought, behaved, and reacted to the world. It predicted his distancing, his finding fault in Tamara, his initiating fights that set back any progress in the relationship, and his enormous difficulty in saying, "I love you." Intriguingly, the research findings explained that though he wanted to be close to her, he felt compelled to push her away. Not because he wasn't into her or because he thought she's not good enough, as Tamara had concluded. On the contrary, he pushed her away because he felt the closeness and intimacy increasing. As it also turned out, Tamara wasn't unique either. The theory explained her behaviors, thoughts, and reactions, typical for someone with an anxious attachment style, with surprising precision as well. It foresaw her increasing clinginess in the face of his distancing. It predicted her inability to concentrate at work, her constant thoughts about the relationship, and her oversensitivity to everything Gray did. It also predicted that even though she decided to break up with him, she could never muster up the courage to do so. It showed why, against her better judgment and the advice of close friends, she would do almost anything to try to be close to him. Most importantly, this theory revealed why Tamara and Gray found it so hard to get along, even though they did indeed love each other. They spoke two different languages that exacerbated each other's natural tendencies. Hers to seek physical and emotional closeness, and his to prefer independence and shy away from intimacy. The accuracy with which the theory described their pair was uncanny. It was as though the researchers had been privy to the couple's most intimate moments and personal thoughts. Psychological approaches can be somewhat vague, leaving plenty of room for interpretation. But this theory can provide precise, evidence-based insight into a seemingly one-of-a-kind relationship. Although it's not impossible for someone to change his or her attachment style, on average 1 in 4 people do so over a 4-year period, most people are unaware of the issue, so these changes happen without their ever knowing they have occurred, or why. Wouldn't it be great, we thought, if we could help people have some measure of control over these life-altering shifts? What a difference it would make if they could consciously work toward becoming more secure in their attachment styles, instead of letting life sway them every which way. Learning about these attachment styles was a true eye-opener for us. We discovered that adult attachment behavior was everywhere. We were able to view our own romantic behaviors and those of people around us in a fresh new light. By assigning attachment styles to patients, colleagues, and friends, we could interpret their relationships differently and gain more clarity. The behavior no longer seemed baffling and complex, but rather predictable under the circumstances. Evolutionary ties. Attachment theory is based on the assertion that the need to be in a close relationship is embedded in our genes. It was John Bowlby's stroke of genius that brought him to the realization that we've been programmed by evolution to single out a few specific individuals in our lives and make them precious to us. We've been bred to be dependent on a significant other. The need starts in the womb and ends when we die. Bowlby proposed that throughout evolution, genetic selection favored people who became attached because it provided a survival advantage. In prehistoric times, people who relied only on themselves and had no one to protect them were more likely to end up as prey. More often than not, those who were with somebody who deeply cared about them survived to pass on to their offspring the preference to form intimate bonds. In fact, the need to be near someone special is so important that the brain has a biological mechanism specifically responsible for creating and regulating our connection with our attachment figures.